In this video, I'm going to talk about my favorite crawling and climbing philodendron, as well as which ones are on my wish list. Hey everyone, Pablo from Alluran Inc. here, and in this video, I thought it would be really nice for me to just walk you through which philodendrons that are climbing and crawling I actually own, and which ones I like, and which ones are on my wish list. The first plant is Philodendron Brazil, or Philodendron this. So this has been a plant that's been with me for a few years. I bought it in a hanging basket, and it used to be attached to the side of the fence in my prior house. And what it did is it just took over all over the fence. It would just attach to the fence without any soil, and then also start climbing onto this shade that I had on the side of the house. And this plant got huge. Like the leaves got really, really big. So whenever I moved out, so you can see in that video, what I took was this cutting that had the biggest leaves, like the biggest size, and then I put it here and then allowed it to root and then attach to a moss ball. So a couple of things that are interesting happened with that. The first was like all the leaves that I added, like we have literally not lost almost any of those leaves, which is incredible. If you ask me, particularly like with that size, they're pretty big. Something interesting that I saw about this plant is that the variegation is kind of weird, in the sense of whenever I got this plant, all the leaves that I had a higher variegation. So you can see how they're a lot more lime green, but it kind of lost that as it put out new leaves, and it just went back to having its usual sort of Brazil kind of colors. So I'm not really sure if this plant is fully dependent on what to have the high coloration, except I had one growth point right here. You can see right here. And it was basically just putting out like full moons. I'll take a close-up of it. You see all of these leaves are just lime green. I'm not even sure if they're photosynthesizing. I'm assuming so. And then it just got green again somehow. So I'm not really sure what determines that in this plant. Now, you might be familiar with a couple of versions of this plants or cultivars. The first one is going to be the Rio, which looks like this. And the other one that I think is majorly different is the Gabby one, which is a specific cultivar that they got and were able to stabilize. And they look like this. I personally think they look different, but not different enough for me to want to own them all. So I just put it here for you to know the variety of the different leaf colorations, and also the variety of how different the prices are. I personally think the Brazil is beautiful. I think it is cheap, affordable, easy to grow, and is one of those plants that you can have in a basket, you can have in a moss bowl, you can do whatever you want with it, and it's fairly simple. This plant is currently sitting on a semi-hydro aroid mix, so Philodendron Brazil is definitely a top philodendron. Up next is my Philodendron Burle Marx Variegated. This is a plant that has the weirdest growth weight. It's just chaotic. I mean, I'm putting a zoom in and I'll just walk you through like what I see. Basically, the plants will just grow out of every possible node, that auxiliary node, and then you basically just get the variegation that you would get in all of them. So some of them will just turn straight up like dark green and then will not have any variegation on it. Some other ones will turn fully green or yellow or fully variegated and then kind of like die off. And then you end up with some really nice ones that just find a good sort of balance. Like this one is just beautiful balance between like half moons, and then like the chunkiness. Something that I definitely recommend for this plant is that you should be proactively just trimming the green sort of growth points. I think that is not what well, me personally, I don't want it to be green. I want it to be as variegated as possible. So by taking out those growth points that are only green, I think that really allows for the aesthetics to be a lot more pleasant for me, because you have a lot of the green and the yellow in all the leaves. This has been a fairly slow grower in the sense of like, it doesn't grow up. It has not attached too much to the moss pole that I gave it, and it has not sort of like sized up, but it has gotten super, super bushy. And that is what I was saying about all the different growth points being activated. It's sort of like you just get this bush of a plant, which explains why so many people in Florida do the non-variegated version as like at the bottom of like palms and stuff like that. I love that look, and I think this is a beautiful plant. I would definitely recommend it. It's not really difficult. This plant is sitting in a leca container with the moss pole, and it has been fairly simple to keep happy in semi-hydro. So that is definitely something that you could try with this plant, and I think it wouldn't be too bad. Up next is a crawling philodendron that you probably think it's not worth being in the top, but when I tell you the journey we've been in, you will be sold. So this is the Philodendron pastazanum. When I purchased it, it was sold as pastazanum, and then it ended up being relabeled as like pastazanum red point, which I was like, sure, why not? It looks like a pastazanum and it has a red point. So I just went on with that sort of explanation forever. And then I kind of learned through someone's comment, thank you very much. They were like, definitely that's a Dean McDonald. And I was like, maybe. So I did some research, and I guess this is what it is, just because it has the red cataphyll, and I wasn't really able to find anything speaking of a red point pastazanum, except from Equageneria, which is who I think I purchased it, through or from. So I don't know if it's just them doing this weird sort of naming for plants for whatever reason to make everything more confusing, or if there's an actual other kind. It doesn't matter. The point is, this plant has been with me for around 4 years now, and it has been incredible. The one outside, which is the mother one, has sized up in a way that is incredible. Look at the pictures. It gets this beautiful heart leaf. It is not velvety. It is more like shiny. It creates a lot of extra floral nectaries, which means that you're going to get a lot of droplets everywhere. So it does attract a lot of ants and other insects. So if you don't want that, just know this plant's like a magnet, because this particular specimen is extra special because it has a mutation in which the leaf grew a two-leafer. So you have one single petiole, but then it becomes two perfect functional leaves. This is the first, this is the second one. They're all both basically attached into the same petiole through there. Not really sure what caused it. Could be physical damage, just an exception. We'll see what the next growth point does. But if this begins just to mutate into a double leaf pastazanum slash Dean McDonald, I'll be super excited. So this has been a very easy plant to grow. It has been a difficult plant to maintain because it sizes up really fast and the leaves are really frail. So all my leaves end up being just destroyed by the wind. Even when I was in the house, the leaves were not having a good time. So that's just something you need to like figure out with this, is if it's going to be outside, you need to be okay with the ripped leaves and the browning edges. And if you're going to keep it inside, I think you need to be okay with the size of it and how long the actual petiole is. Even though the leaf is big, the petiole is also very long. Up next is a Philodendron Micans. I showcased this one when I was talking about moss poles, and which moss poles I do not like. Spoiler alert, is this kind. But I already had one whenever I transferred my Micans from its basket into here. I'm gonna be honest, Micans was always one of those plants that I felt kind of neutral-ish about. Love the velvet color, love the dark metal brown color that it has. But I don't know, I just never found it to be like as cute. I don't particularly care much for like hanging baskets and stuff like that. So it was just meant to fail by being a hanging basket. So I felt very neutral about it. Then when I moved out, I decided to put it into this moss pole, and I just attached all the different growth points and set them off. And as you can see, it has been successful and not so successful in certain points. So some of them attach really, really easily to the plant and have size up. Other ones have not even attached a little bit, and I think it's just because of the kind of moss pole. So the only thing that I have with this one is basically I just keep tangling together all the growth points, and whenever they're starting to point up like this, then I'll just turn them around and point them down. My goal with this is to just be like dripping. I want it to be like all covered in leaves, and then also the bottom, and then hopefully even more. So that is like my dream for this plant. So far it's been okay. It's a very simple plant to grow. I have not had issues with it as long as you're not micromanaging it. I think this plant does not do well with too much water. So this is one of those like thrive on neglect kind of plants. I think the Micans is like very good for that. And then what you can expect about the leaf size is for it to get around that big, maybe even a little bit bigger. But compared to like Melanochrysum or some of those big ones, you can see it's like a finger-ish width, like height. They might get a little bit bigger than that, but this plant will stay fairly small leaved. but it will get really, really messy. Now, there's another 3 types of Micans that I would like to talk about, mostly because I love them and they're my wish list, but it just made more sense to put them right here rather than at the end. So Philodendron Micans has become variegated, or at least the variegated versions have hit the market over the past couple of years. I think within the last 6 months, the price has dropped a lot. But when I started purchasing plants back in October, November through Palm Street, which you can also check out my affiliate link in the description, this plant I realized came now in a few shades. So the first one is going to be the Micans Aurea, or the yellow variegation Micans, which looks like this. I think this one is really pretty, and just like the variegated melanochrysum, the variegation in here has a more brown hue to it, which I think makes it a little more interesting. But the next one that I think it's a lot cuter, but I have heard is so unstable, is the Micans that is called a halo variegation. What this means is it has this white mutation all around the edge of the leaf. So instead of it having just like its normal kind of like reddish one, it just becomes white. I think that one is really difficult to get really variegated because you're limited to just a little edge. And 2, I think it's really difficult for it to grow, multiply, and for you to propagate. I just saw or have heard of a lot of people purchasing it and then being very disappointed with it just because they did not love the way it grew. It basically looks a lot like this, except you have some few white spots around it. And then the one that everybody's just like going insane for is the variegated pink Micans, which I think is absolutely gorgeous. I don't like the fact that one leaf cutting with a growth point and no roots is sold for like $300 like 6 months ago. I have seen it go all the way down to maybe more than $80, maybe more than $70, less than 120 for like one, maybe rooted in a small like moss. I don't know. I think that's really risky unless you have the money, unless you have the time and you feel confident on growing a Micans from a tiny little thing. I personally think it's difficult. So I would wait for it to have at least multiple growth points or be slightly rooted or something like that. So you can at least guarantee that all the money you're spending is not just going to be a plant that dies in a week and a half. This plant is pretty chill. It doesn't matter the soil. Mine is currently sitting on an aroid type kind of mixture, which just comes from the other house. I would love if this was in like leca or semi-hydro. And then if I would have done that, I would have put a wick or one of those, the nylon wicks. I would have just put it all up this moss pole, all the way up, so it would connect the top of the moss with the reservoir. And I think that will have helped a lot, this type of moss pole. And I think it would make this Mican's life a lot easier to attach. It just dries out too fast and the roots don't love it. Up next is my Philodendron Glorious. This is the oldest rare aroid that I own, and it has been an incredible experience with it. It grew huge, and I used to have it on a pot. I had it in this really long horizontal pot outside, and it grew massive. It had such good leaves. It had so many like pubs, and it had just multiplied that I ended up literally giving them away for free so I wouldn't have to throw them out. But then this plant really struggled coming back inside. I took it out of its soil, and then I put it in the long method for semi-hydro, which I basically just means you put a little hormones and growth in there for it to like root, like a root hormone, and then you put some nutrients, and then you swap out the water like once a week or fairly often, and then eventually the roots that are there are either gonna like rot and you can clean them off, and then you can see the new water roots kind of growing. And that is a long process, but it helps. And I thought it was gonna work out. This plant was basically sitting just in the water solution growth thingy for like a month, and then I decided to put it into its container with leca, and that was fairly mixed results. It has taken such a long time to grow that I'm honestly very impressed that it has even managed to create a leaf like this to be the last. Basically, the entire growth point got messed up, and then the plant just did not grow a new leaf in the longest time. Eventually, like months in advance, it tried to grow or activate this growth point right here, which I'm showing a video. And then eventually it managed to push out this little leaf, and then it pushed out another tiny little leaf. And I was like, well, I guess we're just going back to like zero, just like a small plant. But then the next one was this big, and I was fairly happy. It got so I'm super happy that this plant is still with me and it's surviving and putting out leaves. But I'm gonna be honest, these crawling philodendrons are difficult to keep inside indoors in a way that makes sense for other plants because they just go forward so much, as you can see, that they just push everything if you put it in the back, and if they're in the front, then they just go, they're difficult. So I definitely would suggest that you think about getting a crawling philodendron very, very strongly. You better have a good spot. You better be ready to purchase a side container. And then you better be ready to have long petioles with leaves that you need to be taming. This right here is my Philodendron Mamei Rojo. This plant is just like the normal Mamei, except it has a red sort of petiole where it gets this sort of really nice waves. And then you see this is red. And of course, it has that beautiful silver splotchiness in the leaves, which makes it beautiful. I got this plant as an add-on from Rare Plant Fairy, and I paid that much. It was like a super deal, so I wanted it. I should have known better. I need to stop purchasing crawling philodendrons, even though they're cool. This plant has been so difficult to keep controlled. So initially it came in a lot of perlite with some moss. And when I tried to take it out, I just couldn't. I was gonna rip out all of the roots, and I did not want this plant to go through that kind of trauma. So I ended up just removing as much moss as possible, adding extra perlite, and then I added a bunch of leca. That was worked out really well. The plant liked it. It pushed out a bunch of roots into the reservoir, and the rest is history. The problem was once it pushed out all those roots into the reservoir, like here, it didn't really have a need to put out more roots over here. And so all of the growth that it has is like not attached to anything. So it's just attached at the base that you can see, like I can just move it. And I've struggled so much to produce more roots in this plant. Like I air layered it, no roots. I buried it into the leca, like up, no roots. I don't know what the hell I need to do to get this plant like to pull it together. I see the roots, they're there, they just need to be activated or start like growing, but they don't. So I've struggled a lot with this plant. As you can see, it hit the end of its pot, and then again, it's not attached to anything, and then it just went up. It was like, yeah, I'm just gonna climb up, I guess. And I'm like, I guess. So this is one leaf that I like. This is the latest leaf, and you can see like the newer one is over there. I'm not really sure what is the correct term for this, but whatever sunflowers do to like move around and follow the light, this plant does this. It doesn't do it with any of my other crawling philodendrons, not the Dean whatever, and not the Glorious. This one will just shift its growth point and shift all of the leaves and shift all of the petioles towards the light the instant you move it out. So I literally have it in one spot and it got a little too big. So it was facing, out this way. So you can see the leaves were facing kind of like that way. But then I had to move it up into the shelf because it was getting too messy. And then I had it face forward into the light because I was like, okay, well now at least all the leaves are going to like face forward. But it didn't do that. These leaves decided to just stick to the side and grab onto this light. These ones are, of course, all fighting forward. So you see this leaf is literally attached all the way back here. Like all the leaves have completely like moved up. It's such a weird experience when the plant is so mobile. I don't even know how to call this when the plants are just like moving everywhere, but this plant moves. And if I had to do it all over again, I don't think I would get this plant. I love it. I think it's beautiful, and I'm glad I own it. If I had to do it again, I don't think I would, just because this plant is so damn unruly and so difficult to just keep happy. I mean, no, it's happy. It's just difficult for it to stay in an aesthetic way that I like. Does that make sense? Like it's just difficult for this plant to look good to me when it's growing like this and it's so disorganized. So it looks great on the picture. Let me smile for it. Do you have a Philodendron Mamei? Is it similar to with yours? Is mine different because it's the Rojo? Mine just hates me because I've been moving it around too much. I'm not sure, but I would love to find out. This is my wish list for all the crawling and hanging philodendron. But guess what? There are no crawling philodendron here. I don't want more. I'm good. I have three. I have my Gloriosum, I have the Dean wannabe Pastizanum, and I got the Mamei. That's it. I don't want any more. It's enough. It's a mess. You should not have three of them. Don't do it. Learn from me. Don't pick one. Actually, don't pick either. Don't pick any of them. Pick a climbing one. Those are so much easier. So much. You can just control it. Crawling philodendrons are just messy and are just unorganized. So for the trailing philodendron that I do like, the first one that I would like to own is the Philodendron brandy, right? It looks like this. This is one of those weird trailing philodendron that actually sizes up if you make it into a climbing, but I don't particularly care for that. So I have seen some of the baskets and some of the moss pole kind of like old 360 vibe, similar to the Micans, and it looks so beautiful. I love the silvery, and I feel like I'm already creating a silver leaf collection over here with like my silver sword and like all my heterophylla and all that stuff. So I feel like it would be a great addition to like this silver corner, but it's definitely not like I would have to find a really pretty specimen for a great price for me to get it. And then the other one is going to be the hederaceum, right there. Variegated. So this one is somehow expensive, and I'm just too ignorant. And to me, it kind of looks like just like a Brazil, but it's not. So it's a completely different thing, and it comes in multiple variegations and multiple types, and some of them are really expensive. So if I had to pick one, I would probably have to go with the brandy because the header, whatever. The other one is just too similar to other looks, but I just wanted to talk about it because I've seen it and a lot of people want it and it's really expensive. So I was like, oh, that could be an interesting one. I mean, just look at that, right? It has a feel to it. Like it does give you Brazil, but it's still different. So it has a little like more like variability. Thank you for watching. Comment down below and let me know which philodendrons did I miss, which ones are in your favorite top list, and which ones do you own and not like. Right now, YouTube thinks this video is the best one for you.